let's look at a progressive bass line for this tune. So if we're starting on the first couple of chords, right? A minor 7 to D7 to G. If we just track roots and fifths of the chord, we can have ourselves a little bass line here. So A minor, the root and fifth would be A to E. And always, always, always track and notice the patterns that this creates, because that root to fifth pattern could be used for any major or minor chord. First finger, and then down a string and a whole step higher. So we want to just track that on the fingerboard. Be aware of what's happening. A minor, here's another one. Root, and then the fifth is straight over, up a string. So we'd get this kind of pattern walking around the instrument. So again, A minor, D, G, C. Now it gets a little more complex with a diminished pattern, right? Minor 7-5-5 has a diminished triad on the bottom. So if that's gobbledygook, don't worry about it. F sharp, A, and C natural is the chord here. There's an E as well. So F sharp, A, C natural, E is the F sharp minor 7-5-5 chord. So those chord tones, the root and then the fifth of the chord would be F sharp and C natural. So that is a dissonant interval, and it's just as important as any of the other root fifth patterns, right? So actually it creates a nice little tension resolving to the B, because we move up to the C and then it's only a half step away to resolve to the root of the next chord, which is a B7. If we continue our pattern, root is a B, the fifth of that chord is an F sharp, and we end up with that pattern resolving to the E, E minor, root, fifth, E and B. So if we walk through the whole A section this way, just tracking root, fifth on half notes, because it's chord per bar, so we're filling up that bar with the root fifth pattern. It would sound something like this. Through the B section. If you want to get more of a walking feel, you can just start playing quarters over the exact same pattern. So you're just repeating every note on quarters instead. Now, we're not really walking a bass line yet, but it can start to give you the feel of what that kind of groove feels like. And that's going to be useful later, because we're going to want to figure out different ways to get from one chord to another. That said, there's nothing wrong with doing the double quarter note pattern. Let's look at the A section as an example of how to get from one chord to another around the circle of fifths. These chords are moving around in fifths, and that's in some ways kind of an ideal movement for walking bass line patterns. If we look at just that first chord change from the A minor 7 to the D7, we have 4 quarter notes to get from point A to point B. So when we are walking, we could either go down or we could go up. If we go down from A to D, hit the root on the downbeat, that's a very easy pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Chord change to the D. Now, if we're walking up, we could still fit 4 notes in there. We just have to add a chromatic passing tone in there. So A minor walking up to D, 1, 2, 3. Oh, well, if I kept going in the scale, I'd already hit a D. So I'm going to add a little C sharp in there and then land on the D on the downbeat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Another way, walking up to get to that D, is to skip over it. So you're not having to add any chromatic tones at all here. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah, so counting beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. But what we're doing is we're outlining that A minor chord, root, passing tone, third, fifth, and then resolving to the root of the D chord. So A, B, C, skip up to your E, and then resolve to the root of the next chord, which is our D. Now, all 3 of these patterns, just walking down, walking up with the chromatic tone, and then walking up and skipping over the next root and resolving back down to it, that's also called encirclement, that pattern. So the D is the target. We played a C, we played an E. It's a note on either side of the target, and then we resolve to the target. That's encirclement. So there's a little bit of encirclement there, right? Resolving to the D. Those 3 different patterns, again, that encirclement, adding a chromatic note walking up, and then just walking straight down, can apply pretty much to any chord that's going around the circle of fifths. So if we look at the same idea from the D to a G, which is the next chord change, well, we could just walk down. Say we walked up. Well, I can walk back down to the G nice and easy. Right? I could keep going to the C. That just fits nicely in a 4-beat pattern. Say I walked down to the D. Well, now I have to kind of walk up to the G because I can't go down very much farther. So I could either do the chromatic version. In this case, the chromatic note we're adding is actually the minor third instead of the major third, right? Before, we were on a minor chord, A minor, so we added the C sharp to get to the D. Here, the F sharp, walking from D7 to G, the F sharp would be the one that's diatonic to the key, that's in the scale. So the chromatic note we're adding is actually a little earlier. It's a beat earlier. What's interesting to notice, though, is in both cases, it's the same pattern, okay? If it's a minor chord, you're playing the minor third and the major third as you resolve. And if it's a major chord, you're adding the minor third and the major third as you resolve. It's just being aware of chord tones is what would make this make a lot of sense to you. And you wouldn't have to think about it too hard because you're already aware of what are the chord tones in A minor and what are the chord tones in D major. If you know that, right, that's why I drill this into my students. Know your chord tones, know the arpeggio patterns, little ones, 3-note arpeggio patterns all over the instrument. Then this kind of conversation becomes a lot easier for you and accessible. Again, so we're walking right now from a D7 to a G. If we're going up, our other option, right, other than the chromatic, was to skip over to the next chord tone and do the encirclement pattern. So D, we'd skip up to an A and resolve to our next chord, which is the G. So that's one way to get to the C. I could start walking down instead. So let's look at a couple of examples of this in the A section. I'm going to start walking up first so that the gist will be going up then down, at least in the beginning. And then we'll see the difference walking down first and then up. 1, 2, 3, 4. The main point is that there's more than one way to get from point A to point B. And if we just train a couple of these different patterns into our instinct so that we're feeling them naturally, it becomes less of a big deal to read through chord chart and walk through changes.